Well, hello everybody. I'm Aaron. I'm here at Bowtie Treasure Studio. As always, no surprise, we're going to be painting furniture, having some fun, maybe learning some new techniques for you, showcasing Dixie Belle Products as always, and it's my delight to be here with you. Last night, kind of my demo project just to make sure that I liked where everything was going. So this is where we're headed. This does not have any top coat on it. And when I do that, the colors will be more vivid. But right now, kind of a, I guess you might call it a grungy, moody, old. I want to keep it old, but definitely got a lot of layers to it. So we want to feature that tonight. And as I typically like to do when I'm working on these projects, I'm going to do my best to stress that there's a lot of ways for you to customize this look for your project. And I'll try and indicate that as we go through it. I'm going to spin it around because tonight I want to feature the flat surfaces on this side. So up at the top, on the side, and if we have time, we'll see where we are. Maybe we'll go to the front side, which the front's going to be the more complicated because we've got different drawers, we've got a big cabinet. Maybe we'll focus on the cabinet. That probably would be a good idea to actually do that. Let's punt and focus on that because I forgot. I definitely want to also play with this would you bend decoration. And I made note and I put it in the description. When you go on Dixie Belle's website looking for would you bend molding, look for number 2093. That will get you to the one that I would do here. I do have a little bit of a rope. I don't know if you can really see it. It was kind of like a molding trim to. When I bought this piece, the top looks like it had been replaced or poorly replaced. And so I've had to do some work on this, and one reason why I put it off for so long is because it needed some repairs. In fact, I may even take the top off later on. But anyways, you might see this little rope here. That's also would you bend. But I would definitely want to showcase this one on the front. All right, let me show you real fast. Not that I have a beautiful one, but let's see right there. That is the before picture of this piece. When I purchased it, the mirror was not attached. In fact, it was broken. I had to fix that. I'm just not going to paint this. It's so big and heavy, and it has an inside frame that holds the mirror. But I did have to repair. You can kind of see, I don't know if you can see the back. Where we go. There we go. I had to repair. This whole piece was broken, so I had to do a lot of surgery on this one a little bit and get it where it needs to go. So it's going to take me a little bit of time to finish this all up. But anyways, this is just a before picture. You can see the marble's not there. I don't even know if it's the original marble. When I took it off, it just has some sketchy look to it. Like maybe even had construction adhesive to keep it together. So I don't know the whole history, but it's definitely had some issues. And I've got some repairs to do on the inside as well. So tonight we'll focus on the finish, and that'll be our task tonight. So I'm going to be wearing gloves tonight. And the reason for that is because this is somewhat of a messy process. And I just like to not have to do some extra cleanup when I'm done. So it's not because there's anything that I'm concerned about. I just like to keep my hands clean so that when I'm done, I can just take them off and not have to go to the sink for a while. Because you're going to see me using a rag. There's a lot of paint on there. And I might even use my fingers in applying some paint, which I did on the side as well. All right, some other tools that I have. I have a couple just damp rags. I've wrung out as much of the water out as possible. You may have seen me use this butcher pan before. If you go to bowtietreasures.com, I do have a Amazon shop under the shop menu, and things like this are in there where you can find other products like this from around my studio that I like to use. And this is really great because I love how sturdy it is. I can put all kinds of paint, make a mess, and we can really go to town. Some other brushes that I used and will probably feature tonight. This is the Scarlet. And the main reason for that, I just like the wide canvas it provides, and nice and stiff and sturdy so you can put it on there. I also had the Big Daddy. We're going to showcase this one, especially on larger surfaces. I have the Belle brush, but this can be swapped out for the La Petite brush. Anything that, it's not critical you have this one, but I do like how it has the tapered feel to it. I have like the 1-inch brush from the Artist brush kit that Dixie Belle sells. But really, again, you can substitute these brushes for the size of your piece. I just had to go a little bit larger because it's a big piece. So that just gives you a little bit of a context of some of the tools I'm going to be using. You can use other things, but just kind of substitute what you have for kind of the same concept. I also have a bucket of water because as I'm going to be moving forward, I may or may not just see. That's kind of my go-to thing. Hey, Dick. So we're going to just walk through those colors, substitute any of those colors. What I would recommend is if you are going to substitute something that is of like value. So a mid-tone color, a dark color, a light color, those kinds of things. And then have fun. That's really the key. I'm going to be using Dixie Belle's misting bottle, but I also have a more industrial size squirt bottle because I need a lot of volume of water. So keep both of these handy. I might even hook it on my shorts just to keep it nearby. So are you ready for some fun? I hope you just enjoy the show, enjoy the process. It may not be your style, but hey, if you want to try something different, you might learn a little bit about texture and layering. I also, for my process, when I worked on the other side, I did have my heat gun. I do have that nearby. For as many layers as we need to get in a little amount of time, I probably will bring out the heat gun. But that's a good time to ask questions, and I'll try and keep an eye on that throughout. Let's do the door, because again, I really want to highlight the wood you've been molding and how we can play around with that. But I'm not going to go too far that way, and because of time and space, maybe we'll work on the side so we can kind of dance between two different sides. But you can see even on this camera view, I can't get the whole top in there, so I'll do my best to. The thing we need to do is get our colors on there, and I'll try and give you the logic behind all my colors. So this is Peacock's a very bold and vivid color, and I just don't think that's going to fly very well for this age and style of piece. So I want to tone it down, give it some age. So one of the things you can do, grays always help neutralize and tone down vibrancy. So I chose Gravel Road because it has a nice, just gravelly gray color. It's kind of warm. So I went opposite of the color wheel. This color has a little bit more red in it. So I'm just going to put some in there. And I never really know how much you need, but just put enough in there so you're not being shy, because this is not a project you want to be super shy about. And that's really next. And so our goal on this one is just to get that color on there. We want to wash it all. And so this is where my large squirt bottle, you can mist, it just might take you a little longer. So just get it all on there. You might consider this technique to be a drippy finish. That's fine too. Let me see here. I think, yeah, this is where I'm going to use the scarlet. I could use a 1 inch, what am I trying to say? I can use anything like a mini. Just want to get a large surface on there. And I do find, I'm going to move this. You're going to see me holding a lot of device. This is where I want to use, I want wet. So if you're ever painting dry, it's because you probably missed misting it or squirting it with the bottle. The other thing that I found out that I really needed last night, not that I haven't done this before, but I'm going to put a towel on the ground so I don't create a work hazard for myself, because all this mist is going somewhere, right? Okay. So here we're really just trying to create layers, and the principle that I'm trying to emphasize here is that this is not the last layer, right? It can be, and that's one of the things I mentioned earlier that you can do is every step that I do tonight, for the most part, could be the last one. But where's the fun in that, right? So this is an aged, grunge, moody, you pick the word. But can you imagine that if I was using something like barn red right now, how vivid and fun this would be? Although I'm not really going vivid and fun, but I do want to leave some of the peacock showing through. I have a little a bolt. Okay, I'm gonna have to move some stuff around. You see how I have the bottle in my a square bottle, because I want to keep this wet. Don't let this dry on you, okay? Because if you do that, then you're going to lose the ability to move the paint or dab the paint. I'm not afraid to get a little paint on other areas. Just don't make that your focus. There's so many sides to this. It is faster for me to work on this piece without being live, because I'm not having to move the camera and stuff like that, but we are moving pretty quick, right? I wanted to have a nice pop of color base, knowing that I'm going to tone it down. Every once in a while, again, I might be squirting on an area I'm not working, just because I want to keep it wet. You see I'm going different directions too? I'm sure the other parts. I have this wardrobe on the carts because the wheels would probably really do some damage on the floor. Sometimes these wheels don't like to spin right. This is a workout right now. So you should start seeing things like the dripping happen. That's because every time I mist it with water, that water helps kind of lift the paint up. Now here's where I want to play a little bit. So I'm going to get the misting bottle and just give it a little bit of this rag. I love doing this. This rag enhances that texture and breaks up any drips, brush strokes, but it gives it more of an inconsistent look, especially in the middle. If you want more of that peacock to show, then lift a lot of that gray back out, especially near the middle. I'm going to leave a little bit more of it towards the edges. And if you want, you could do it where as you go further down, it's darker. And move the rag around. You can use a sponge. Just go with an irregular look, knowing that this is just one of several colors. So again, lighter in the middle. And this, after that, you can come back and use your misting bottle to really soften up any of that. The more water, the more drips. And you can see I'm already starting to get a lot of paint on there. So you can just sit back and just look for little areas. You may have seen some people use things like half vinegar, half water. That'll create some interesting rivers and cool texture. Let's see if I can show you. So just the depth, there's probably a little bit more texture there. You remove or add as much of that as you want. You see how I'm adding little drips there. So that's one color. So this will, again, we're going to move quickly. I'm using the misting bottle more. See how fast I'm moving? This is not a requirement. I'm just moving so that we can keep this moving. I'm moving quickly so we can keep it moving. But there's no wrong way to do this. Slow, fast, 15 colors, 2 colors. The principles are really layers, wet, and texture. Probably what you'll find though is the more color you put down, it may very well be that it's more color you wind up wanting to lift off because you put too much. Like if you put too much of this, it's like, why did we even, maybe not, maybe why did we paint all that peacock? It's really up to you. You don't have to do a dark color. You can do, what if this was buttercream or drop cloth or sandbar? Okay, you see how I'm not putting as much in the middle? Let's go back with This is where I'm lifting, adding texture. I like to call this my eraser. If you watched my live a few weeks back where we painted the Singer sewing machine boxes, this is a little bit reminiscent of that process, but just on a much grander scale. Still layers, still transformative. Okay, so you can kind of see I've almost reverse brushing. And just like I did on the other side, take your mister bottle after you're done dabbing and soften up some of those areas. I just kind of let some of that paint move a little bit. And if you like that heavy texture, then don't mist it. Like for example, one of my favorite things to do, and you need to determine when you're going to do it, is I'll take the misting bottle and I'll just do almost like just a quarter squirt. And it's almost like spitting water, but those little drops of water will add some surprise and magic. Can you see these runs right here? I'm not a huge fan of heavy runs, so this is your opportunity to kind of discourage some of that. So I just usually, this is where you're composing. You're just dictating where do you want it and where you don't. But trust me, we're going to come back and continue some more magic. And that's where I also like doing the heat gun, is because I can escalate the drying time so I have less unpredictable results. But let's leave that there. All right, so we're back to the front. And you can see wow, it looks great. I'm going to go back. Things are still a little wet, and just encourage a little bit of drying time in some areas. I think that's working great. It almost looks like the other side, but we did much more than that. So we're going to bring in some Farmhouse Green. A little messy now, but Farmhouse Green. See if it'll even focus. There we go. This is a pop of color and also acts as my light highlight. We're not going to use it a lot, but this could be any color that is interesting to you. And I'm going to put just a dab. It's like a cooking show. A little dab of Muscadine Wine. And the reason for the Muscadine Wine is to give me a complement color. Complement of reds and greens. Greens and blues is red. So I want a little bit of that, what do we call that? Kind of a rusty. Now, one of the things that I did on the other side is I actually am going to use my finger, and let's just add some red. Just a few dabs here and there. Random, maybe, but I want some of this to drip. Okay, maybe we'll put some around the. This could be a color that you want to look a little rusty. So this could play a little bit on the flow distressing side. And you can see it's just a little bit, not much. Just a few dabs here and there, okay? That was Muscadine. And the reason for that is I wanted a red, but I want it to be dark. So now what you can do is you can come in there back with the water. You can mist it, or you can squirt it. You know, if you really want to move, do you see how it just ran down? Here's where you might say, okay, well, I'm going to do that, but so you can even start dabbing it. Again, I love the rag. It just gives it unpredictable texture. And I like that it's actually becoming a brush. I just spread it out, and I can also dab some of that running. So if I just use my finger, it's going to look too perfect, too round, too clean, and the rag breaks that up. And this is where you just have to experiment and try more, less. We're going to layer over this, so I'm not too, if you're worried about it being too vibrant, pick a different color, but don't don't lose too much. Now I'm starting to actually wipe off some of the previous layers. You can see that I'm not too concerned, but I'm concerned that I don't do too much of that. Okay, I don't want to wipe off all the work. So I stepped away. I went to the bottom too much and some of this started drying, so you might need to give it a little bit more aggressive on, because it's going to dry quick. That's what paint wants to do, is dry, right? Okay. So I'm using my eraser slash dabber. So let me bring in on the center piece. So encourage some of that. I think I'm gonna leave that one right there. Others, I just want a hint of this. I don't, in my mind, I don't want this color to take over. It's not the focal point. So just a few places. And again, you'll see me use the rag a lot tonight. Optional how much and how little you do that. So put as much muscadine in there as you want, but I just have a little bit in case we have another color. Farmhouse Green. Here's my pan. Might be hard to see in the Farmhouse Green. It's very bright. I haven't cleaned out my brush. No need. This bright color will be prominent unless you want this next technique to be more of a dry brush. Purple door, good to see you. So on the other one, I'm just going to hit the top of this would you bend. In just a second, I'll bring in. Nah, I'll bring in now. So you see how I'm highlighting. And if you missed the beginning, I said this, look for 2093. So the other thing that I did on the side, which I really liked, was I'm just dragging it. With the intention that I'm going to eventually wet this down. I'm just looking for unexpected surprise texture and layering. You could dab this, stencil it, but I'm mainly only doing this. You're going to see that I'm only doing this in the middle. I want the middle to stand out and highlight more. Vignetting is another word that I would use. So let's come back now with our rag. We're just going to wet that down, because wetting it down may not make that run right away, but it will soften the paint. So I can come in and erase and determine where I want some of that and where I don't. I don't like some of these bigger strokes that happen from my brush, but I want some of that dry brush. This is just totally random texture. Random, but playing from a standpoint I want it, right? So that misting allows for that lifting of the paint. And I think that'll work. So it's just slowly building up depth. And on the front that we haven't done here yet is finger painting. You can use a brush for this, a palette knife. There's actually like a dent crack right here. I want to just put some red right in there. Can I tell you not a secret, but a thought to think about? On this particular piece, there's a lot of movement in the drawers. What I mean by that is these old pieces, they wiggle, they move. There's going to be scratched paint. It's inevitable. There's no way this piece won't have scratched paint, just because wood on paint doesn't always, you can put as much gator out as you want, but there's going to be scratches. So this is a little bit of my way to say, hey, there's going to be imperfections, so let me add some more, because when this starts scratching and getting used and going through life, we're just enhancing it, right? Does that make sense? Hopefully that. So misting it allows me to dab it add some texture to it. If you want to give some more drip than others, that's great. Give a little bit extra more. You're making the paint move. It's another way of describing it. Drag it, touch, whatever you want. I don't want these to be super prominent. I mentioned that on the other side. But these are going to look like stains, sections of imperfection. We want to embrace all of that. On how you can see some of the Farmhouse Green streaks and strokes in the process. Hopefully the camera's not looking too funny. It's kind of has some weird stuff, but yeah. Okay, so we'll let that dry. It's so far so good jumping between the two. Continue down our color list. We've finished Peacock, Gravel Road, Farmhouse Green, Muscadine Wine. Now I'm just gonna do a really quick Midnight Sky. And the reason for Midnight Sky, one, it's a dark color, but it's still on the blue side rather than Gravel Road. As you can remember, if you remember, Gravel Road is more on the red gray side. Midnight Sky. Surprisingly, Midnight Sky is going to look like it has red in it. Sometimes when you take the colors in their transparent level or first coat, you're going to see some different undertones. And I'm speaking from experience just doing it on the far end. Let's get out the big daddy. So this is going to be, I want a big canvas here, and I want to be able to move the paint very quickly. So next we need to do, get my towel back in here. Whenever I bring out the large squirt bottle, the floor gets really wet. So you see how I'm really getting the whole piece wet? And I'm even going to get my brush wet. Think of this as watercolor. So here's the color, here's my brush. I'm not trying to load it up with too much paint. You just need some paint on there. If you have to, water for everything. Let's squirt some on the pan, right? Just keep it loose. Okay, remember the vignette we're going for? We want it to be highlight. So what we're going to do here, I can quickly tell immediately where I did not get water. So put that water bottle on my hip. Can you see the red tones come through? This is almost like giant wax. You've probably seen people wax their piece. And if it's not wet, I mean, if it's feeling sticky and dry, you're not working wet enough. You see how quickly I can move that paint around in a watercolor, wet fashion? In a minute, one of the last steps we're going to take is what I describe as shading. We're almost shading right now. Vignetting would be a good word. Antiquing. Do you see how I'm just put that dark color anywhere you want it to be moody and dark? Doesn't matter. All right, I'm going to mist this down because again, I want it wet. And we're going to come back in just a little bit more and just soften that up. We can make the vignette wider. I just kind of want to make sure the paint's going where I want. Now, keep in mind at this point, we have been doing it all night. If you want to come back in and add a little bit of texture or to remove, if it's too much, now's the time to remove some of it, kind of dab certain areas. Just so many options. You may want this soft, meaning more of a smoky look, softer vignette. But right now I'm kind of removing some of it. And then I'm gonna just, That was more of erasing, but I think I'd like the softer a little bit. Okay. So that color is optional too. I mean, how dark do you want to go with that shading? It's totally up to you. Keep in mind that you do need to let your paint dry. It may dry lighter or darker, but you're gonna have to trust the process of all the creativity. That looks good. And I'm gonna go back to the middle a little bit and try and remove any wetness or darkness that may have. Now, one more, I mentioned this a while ago, but let's talk about texture again. So if you really don't like that very soft shading, that's so moody right now. Then you can even come back with a misting bottle and you can just spit on it. And that adds a little bit of texture. That smooth paint that may be counterproductive to what you're trying to do. So let me show you, it's starting to already happen. Do you see the spots happening? That's still more texture you just added. There you go. I don't know if the dots are coming through or not, but that just breaks it from being polished and refined, because the whole thing's been about texture anyway. So just experiment with layering. It adds mystery, excitement, depth, energy, all kinds of fun stuff. And then when you go and touch that wet, it's gonna lift lighter. If you've ever taken an art class in school, we used to use rock salt with watercolor, and it would do that. It would soak up all the paint, and it would be a really cool technique too. Spray and go at it with the Big Daddy. Didn't you just love the Big Daddy? Do you have that? Now this side got a lot more drip than the front side, but we're going with it because this is a unique, one-of-a-kind piece. So we're gonna go back with the Big Daddy. My paint's setting up already. I probably have more paint than I really need, but we don't want any dry. If it's dry, it's not gonna go on loose and wet, and we want that. Okay, so remember, you can already tell I don't have enough water on it. I don't know how I can spray it so aggressively and it still finds dry spots. You can use smaller brushes than I'm using. I just found that, wow, I can get so much more done and get that look I'm trying to go for faster. But sure, you can use a mini or a chip brush would be okay, a premium chip brush probably. But even if it was a regular chip brush, that's okay too, because you want texture anyway. You're gonna see, if you haven't been on Pinterest and on social media long enough, you're gonna see a lot of this. There's plenty of people that do this moody, drippy, layered. Find your own style, find your own way of, if you like this style. This is not for everybody, I get. I'm just demonstrating some different techniques. And I probably have done this about every 10th piece maybe, so it's not a first time look for me. But every time I use it, it's just fun to experiment with different color palettes, different projects. And I will tell you, it looks a little dark on my camera. And because I moved my light, it looks even darker. White. Give you the accurate. So you will have to stay tuned for the staged finish results, which I'll definitely get some good close-ups and things like that. So you remember I did some erasing to kind of get rid of. This is where maybe a smaller brush could be in your advantage because you don't get as wide. But then remember we came back, soften that a little bit. Not blended, just soften some of the stamping. And then we're gonna spit on it a little bit. Not really spit, but this just adds a little bit of that. If I could show you on camera, but just like a. And it just adds a little bit more texture, which is great. And then once that starts eating, it may not be the right word, but give it just a little bit lift, just to let that water. And you'll have people looking at your piece so confused on how in the world did they get that look. This is it. Layering, wet layering, dry layering. This is the part I say I edited out. Okay, there we go. That's what we want. So I'm going to grab, I said Belle brush earlier, but I'm going to go back to the La Petite and maybe the 1-inch. And let's talk about shading. Now, we have one more color to go, right? If you're keeping track, we have coffee bean. Coffee bean could be replaced with other colors like caviar, or just stay with midnight sky. Don't even switch. But coffee bean is brown, and it gives me a nice dark color, so we're gonna do that, okay? So this is coffee bean, my super used bottle. It's almost empty. Shading is basically compared to like waxing. So we did it on a large scale on the outside, but now we're gonna go a little smaller. And we're going to, so what I wanna do is I wanna make this look like it's got shadow behind it. If you wanna get it in there, like, we don't want any pure peacock in there anyway. And I really haven't dabbed anything in there. You definitely need this wet. A lot of questions about, should you top coat first? No, if you're working wet, you'll be great. So try this. Now I'm pushing this in there because I don't want any like peacock areas. How cool is this? It's starting to run on me. We might just leave that. And you can, once you do this shading, you don't really want to keep misting it because you're going to add spots to it. So if you want a nice soft vignette shading, so here we go. So on my YouTube channel, for example, there's a category called, our playlist called shading. This is shading, and I've done this a lot. So this is where, I might not want that much dripping. This is where you're just going to soften the edge. And this is where I really like the La Petite brush. So we're creating that shading, vignetting, shadowing. This is just chalk paint, okay? If I didn't tell you, you might later on think it was, you know, dark wax, brown wax. Using my brush, my rag to be an eraser, because you're more likely, because you're trying to get it in there, you don't have to soften this. You see how I just dabbed it? You can leave that texture. This, what I'm doing right now, makes for a very soft blend. I'm not blending anything actually. There's only one color at play here. This is just one way of getting rid of brush strokes, but so far everything's been about texture. So I'm just kind of softening the edge. I'm gonna go back. I just like that idea of having just a little bit of rag texture on there so it doesn't look so. Now, because of what I just did by dabbing everything, what am I trying to say? Pushing all that color in there. Now I'm going to use my wet rag, my damp rag, and wipe off some of that extra coffee bean. I don't want the coffee bean on the outer edge. So you should be seeing this highlight color is actually Farmhouse Green that I put on earlier. So I'm just erasing again. Get that in there. Yes, I'm a huge fan of gilding wax. I have not determined that will be happening here. And by the way, I took all the knobs off, so I need to do this process on all the knobs. So I added all of this depth and moodiness to help to go with the outside edge. So there is a lot of paint in there. So if you feel like you put too much, you could probably even get a Q-tip, or you could even take your brush, put it on your rag, and just go in there and get a little bit of that if you've done too much. It really is up to you. So another thing you might even try, if you feel like you lost it, go back in there. Let me just use this La Petite brush. I just put some Farmhouse Green and just add a little bit more of that color back if you feel like you lost it. And I'm doing this so this wood you bend pops off even more. It would be perfectly fine for me to go back in with my finger with some Muscadine wine and reintroduce some of that red. Just tapping it, just being playful. So that's kind of what we're looking at there. Hopefully it's focusing. Yeah, and everything's up for change. So like, I personally feel like it's a little too clean. Go back and just kind of dab some of that off. Whatever you want to do. So all in all, you can still see some of the Farmhouse Green dry brushing, all the shading, the textures, and you can see now that the two sides they're coming together, right? So we have this really cool glow happening in the middles, and then the sides are nice and dark. I can see some brush strokes from my rag. But yeah, this will all get top coated and it's just gonna scream cool. It's already cool now, and I will admit 100%, not everybody's style, but on this one, it's gonna be a standout piece from a standpoint of, it's got so much character and depth that it just begs to be looked at. So I hope that was fun to watch at least, and you learned a couple things. If you have any questions, please put those in the comments. I'll definitely go back out later and check it out. Be sure to follow me. I appreciate Bowtie Treasures, and make sure you follow YouTube. All right, friends, thanks so much for watching. I'm Aaron here in the Bowtie Treasures studio. Be awesome. Do something creative this week. Until next time, we'll talk to you later.
That's the end of the show. Make sure you subscribe and ring the bell before you go. Bye.